Hi, guys. We are here. Welcome to Alia and Co., the podcast where we talk about some kind of complicated ideas and we just make them really easy to understand. Today's topic that we're going to be delving into is unexplained things. And by the way, I'm your host, Alia Kizilbash. Has there ever been a time where you've walked into a room and just felt the tension and nobody even said anything? Or maybe you were just sitting there thinking about someone that you haven't even seen or heard from, and it was just kind of like a marginal character in your life, but then all of a sudden they call you, like it's just kind of a strange thing. Or imagine like you've been looking for something frantically, like you're looking for your keys and you've looked 100 times in all of the obvious spaces and you can't find them. And then finally you look back in that same obvious spot and all of a sudden it's there. And I feel like there's some aspect of this unexplained phenomenon where you kind of feel like, that makes no sense. But then you're like, yes, it does. It kind of makes sense. And so, what we're here to do today is delve into that aspect because there is actually a scientific basis to a lot of these things. I mean, if I told you that, I wonder. So what we're here to do today is really break down those things and have this discussion where we're talking about these unexplained phenomena, specifically intuition, energy, manifestation. And I have a wonderful guest here today, which, Heather, I would just love for you to introduce yourself.
My name is Heather Blaise. I'm a trial attorney. I've been practicing law for 17 years now. Never lost a jury trial. Use my intuition a lot for that, I think, in every way. And I think my whole life, but over the past several years, I've put a very direct focus on tapping into my intuition and syncing up with the universe's synchronicities, which is a little bit about what you were touching on and a little bit about manifesting what you want your life to be as opposed to the experience that you're having in the moment and how you can shift that when we think that we don't have very much control.
I love that, and we're gonna really deep dive into that. I feel like there is a lot of lived experience when it comes to that. I'm gonna ask you I can't wait to get into that. You're mentioning, at least with being in entertainment law and being able to be in the courtroom, specifically with that. Do you find that maybe there was ever a time where you were presented with facts, but your gut feeling was something else? And if that was the case, like, how did you kind of calibrate when that happened?
So I think that as an attorney, that happens a lot, both when you're first initially meeting a client and they're telling you their version of the story, and as an attorney you want to understand your client's version of the story, but there are often moments where you're like, knowing what I know about human nature, knowing what I know about my experience on earth, that doesn't quite sound right. And you can tell that there's a version that is clouding what the real facts are. And that I can't give you specifics because that would potentially expose confidential information, but I can tell you that it happens a lot.
Right.
And, so much so that when I've explained this to my son, I have used the difference between the truth and a fact. You can have a lot of facts that are all factually accurate, but that's not necessarily the truth. It's kind of like, if you remember, and you may not because I think you're younger than me, but in the 80s, sitcoms in the 80s, they would, every once in a while, they're episodic in nature, and, every once in a while they would do one of these episodes where it would be like her version of what happened,
Mm-hmm.
his version of what happened, and then the end of the act would be like the truth of what happened or some variation there. And I think that a lot of times with the law and when you're trying to help solve disputes and it's often about a misunderstanding about what happened or a difference in perspective about what happened, um, it often feels like that 80s sitcom where it's like, um, you know,
Is
and
there a
then
laugh
this,
track?
yeah, and then this happened, and it's like, well, yeah, that happened, but we're not reading for context
Mm-hmm.
of details, and we're leaving out other certain facts that would change, like the truth of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And many times because I'm a litigator, and the ultimate goal, I mean, many cases settle, but the ultimate goal is to convince 12 people that your version is what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really important because, I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried to get 4 people to agree on ordering a pizza.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But getting 12 people to agree on a complicated factual scenario or
Mm-hmm.
what that factual scenario means
Mm-hmm.
um, is challenging. And you have to believe that you're telling your story or you're telling your client's story to 12 people who all come to the table with their own life experience. And so usually you're wanting to make the story as simple as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, the more simple the story is, the more likely that was the truth.
Right.
But not always. Sometimes the truth is crazier than you would have thought, and that's happened to me.
Interesting. Are there ways to pick up on the non-truth, like a lie? Like, do you think that there's certain things that people do that you've noticed?
Sure. Yes. Yes. I mean,
Tell us.
I think there's a lot of studies about this, and
Mm-hmm.
I've watched documentaries on like um, micro expressions that
Mm-hmm.
people make, and then you can tell that they're not feeling comfortable with the way that they're answering.
Mm.
And I can't remember the study on it, but they'll freeze frame people, and so it's like you ask them a question. Did you have anything to do with A, B, and C? And just before they answer, they make a face that tells you, but you have to be looking for that little micro
Mm-hmm.
expression. And if you're not, playing it back, actually recording it, if
Mm-hmm.
you're actually just in the moment listening to them, it's hard to pick up on it. So it's like, is that an intuition or is it training
Mm.
or is it something else? I think that we all have more senses than we're aware of,
Mm-hmm.
more senses than just the 5 senses we all know about. And I think the more time we spend with the intention of listening to or picking up on those other senses, the better honed they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that means that you're meditating, maybe that means that you're journaling, maybe that means that you're burning things or anything that you're doing that sets your subconscious level really to say, I'm looking out for proof of this thing that I believe,
Mm-hmm.
including I can tell when someone's lying.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell when someone's lying. I can smell bullshit a mile away.
Yeah.
All of those types of things. I think for me personally, I moved a lot as a kid. I moved like 27 times before I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
I had
That's
to.
a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah, my dad was in the State Department
Uh-huh.
and then in defense contracting, so there was a lot of assignments. I mean, I went to 3 different 6th grades.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. So you have to act like middle school. Those are the worst people on earth.
Yeah. Worst. Yes, yes.
And
Agree.
and your way to survive is to make friends, right? And
Right.
so you need to be open-minded, and you need, you're going to be plopped into a situation where you're going to meet new people, and you have to like connect with them. And for me, I had to do it relatively quickly because I didn't know how long I would be there.
Was there a formula that you had?
Yeah, later on, once I was in high school or like later on in middle school, I would never start the first day of school, even if we moved in the summertime. I would never start the first day of school on the first day of school
Why?
because you just get lost in the shuffle of everyone trying to like sync up with their friends. It's very hard to like be like the new person who
Right.
like maybe people who are interested in meeting a new person. Well, which are a lot. I mean, I think people are predominantly interested in other people, or at least they used to be before social media. Maybe they're even more interested in people now. It's just not in an in-person environment. So I never started school on the first day. Not even the first day of the week usually too, because that can you can get lost in the shuffle that way.
Interesting. I know, actually, I love that you said that, because that is also something that we've all inherently thought. The first day of school, you don't wear your best outfit that day because no one's going to notice it. You wear it the second or third day because, because people are more open and receptive to noticing the details. But that's interesting that you said that, because it's so true.
Yeah, giving yourself a little bit of leeway to where everyone's already made it through their own anxiety of am I going to get to my first class on time? Do I like this teacher? Do I have my supplies? Blah, blah, blah. Where they're a little bit outside of their own head.
That's really intuitive of you. I mean, being a sixth grader and noticing that.
Yeah, I think if you moved as many times as I have, who knows if it's intuition or if it was just from experience. But I do think that my intuition was there all along, but I didn't necessarily put it or accept it as scientific proof almost that I have now. I just took it as for granted, maybe a little bit for granted, but also well, that's just the way things are, and it's not until I was able to slow down and be more focused on my internal voice that I started realizing that it actually is, a gift that you can hone in on. And I think that everyone has.
Right. Oh, no, for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like, there's research that shows that when you focus on your goals, it hardwires. It starts to your brain starts to rewire itself to start to behave a certain way, and especially when it comes to intuition. I think perhaps maybe do you find that maybe that's the case with your sixth grade experience and all of the different moves that you might have had, that you've been continuously rewiring your mind to acclimate to all of these different experiences, and kind of in turn really honing in on that intuition that maybe other people don't get an opportunity to do.
I think that that's an interesting point that I haven't thought about, but I think that that's probably true. And also that you have to kind of pivot. There's a little bit of reinventing yourself. Every time I would start a new school, it was okay. And also connecting with people, because trying to find things that you have in common with others, or reading, is this person going to be my friend? Is this person not going to be my friend? Your social cues and picking up on that is so important in those adolescence and preteen years, that I think maybe that is what has contributed to me being able to read a jury so well, for instance, is that I can, and for anyone who doesn't know how fast you have to make decisions when you're picking a jury.
Walk us through that, because that's something that I'm not familiar with.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of people would want to know. Specifically, I feel like because we've all gotten a jury duty letter, and in my lifetime, I've not been actually selected or had the opportunity to do it.
I haven't either, and I'm really sad. I don't think I'll ever probably get picked, because most lawyers try to avoid other lawyers unless it's a particular type of case, and I really want to do it. I want to be on a jury so bad, but I don't think it'll ever happen for me.
So because you see it firsthand, and I think that for us, it's almost okay, this could be something that might happen for whatever reason. You might be on a jury, you might not be in a jury, but explain what the impact of that.
Sure. So I'm a civil attorney, so this is nothing to do with criminal, and also every judge is different, and including both in federal and state. So I'll say that but I'll tell you generally what you can expect when you're picking a jury. So depending on the judge, they might sit in your panel between 20 and 30 jurors you might have in the room with you. And depending on what you have decided or what the judge has ordered, you could have 14 with some alternate. You could have 14 jurors in the end with some alternates, or you could have less if depending on the case and depending on what the parties have decided. You routinely will get a stack of like index cards that has maybe the juror's picture, and it will have general biographical information about them, their age. Maybe you might get their status, their political affiliation. You might get their religion. You might get where they live. Um, Very, very general information that you would expect to find on a voter's registration card or something like that. And then depending on the way the judge likes to do it, he might or she might ask several general questions to the jurors and ask them to raise their hands. Very, very general stuff. Some of it might be directed about whether or not they've been involved in litigation, what they do for a living, and then you're able to question them directly also later on in the process. The whole process is designed to eliminate anyone with a bias that's not going to be able to be impartial. And of course, people famously try to get out, and they try to get out of jury duty for a variety of reasons. But in the end, you have to make each side, the plaintiff and the defense, will get a certain number of strikes. And those strikes you can use regardless of the reason. You don't have to tell, you don't have to say why you're striking the person.
Okay.
And there's rules of thumb, depending on if you're the plaintiff or you're the defendant and the type of case, there's rules of thumb about what type of demographic you want in terms of who awards more money if you're the plaintiff's lawyer or who doesn't. And depending on so there is a component of selecting that's very fact specific about your case and how you plan. You know, I've had cases where I want really, really smart jurors because I think that they're going to be able to cut through the other side's dumb argument, you know?
So just a quick,
Yeah.
just to put, to my understanding, because,
Yeah.
forgive my ignorance.
No,
but
no.
This is a topic that I don't know a whole lot about. So who's picking the jury then? So
The attorneys.
The attorneys.
The attorneys for the parties.
For both parties.
For both parties.
I see. Okay.
And it's kind of you'll have a certain number of strikes, and it's up to the judge on how that goes.
Okay.
So you typically take turns, and so you are both reading the people in front of you. And this is fast. You don't have all day to, you literally create a map in the moment of the people in front of you and a chart, and you are crossing them out. Or you're thinking, maybe you're conferring maybe with other attorneys or your clients. And then you're also considering, if you're going first, you don't want to waste a strike if you think the other side is going to strike.
So it's a game.
So
also.
it's also a game, and then you're allowed additional strikes for what's for cause, basically, and you would have to then state your reason, and it can't be a discriminatory one. Right. It needs to be one that's based on the case. It's usually based on, like, they said they can't be impartial, and then the judge gets to decide if your strike that isn't just one of your main strikes, if it's for cause, if it's a good enough cause. Otherwise, you might have to waste your good strike, or you might not be able to strike them at all. So you're playing, and the judge also has the ability to strike people too, if they indicate that they can't be impartial or for some other reasons, if it would be a hardship for them to be on the jury or something like that. So it happens very, very, very fast. So you're making these decisions in the moment, and it's, these are like bet the business decisions, because these are the people that are holding like something that you've probably litigated for 5 years in their hands. Right. And it's really based on limited information and how they are sitting and responding to your questions, their facial expressions, their mannerisms, all of that kind of thing. But the other thing is that the foreperson is picked by the jury. So once you've impaneled the jury, they go back, and the jury then picks the foreperson. And usually the foreperson is someone that the jury perceives as having some special skill, or having or being a leader, really. And so I've only not picked the jury, and it's a secret, nobody gets to know until the end who the foreperson was. I've only not picked the foreperson one time. And in that instance, I was only off by one person. He was my second choice. And the reason why that's important is because you got to convince these 12 people, and they do a lot of the work together in the jury room outside, after you close your case. So that if you can know who your foreperson is and you can tell throughout the case, or I can tell.
And you're not told.
You're not told.
Oh,
It's a secret.
Okay,
yeah,
good,
it's a secret.
That's a crucial piece of information. Okay,
yeah, you don't know until the end of the case who the foreperson was. But if you have a hunch or an inkling of who that person is, I can tell as I'm putting on my evidence if I'm tasked with being the person who's watching the jury, because different attorneys have different roles in the trial. But typically that is what I'm doing. I'm watching the jury, and I can tell who's with me, who's against me, who can't stand the other side, who's not, who doesn't like it. It's both a mixture of empathically picking up on it and seeing their cues. And if I have a good hunch on who the jury foreperson is, and I can tell, oh, they really are not liking this line of question. They're bored by it. They want us to circle back on this thing. And I can convince them they're going to do my work for me in the jury room. They're going to be the ones to convince, because typically they're going to have a stronger personality than a lot of the other jurors. That's why the jurors pick them.
Right.
So that part is really, really interesting, that
it's layers.
Yeah.
So you can basically tell by looking at a jury, not only what the feelings are, in terms of, any information or judgment or actions or whatever they're perceiving, but you can also understand the interpersonal dynamics between all of the people that are there and who the quote unquote alpha might be.
Yeah, in a way.
Interesting.
But it's also, it's only at first I was like, oh, I'm just like lucky at that. I'm just lucky.
Yeah.
But now it's like, no, it's a skill set that I've developed. And I mean, knock on wood, I can't make promises or guarantees, but
no, I from the times that we have hung out, the last time you mentioned something to me that I can tell you're highly empathetic. There is something that you're feeling. You feel it. You can feel. You put yourself in a person's shoes, like things that I told you that perhaps I didn't even think you remembered. That so I think that you definitely have this persona. And what's interesting is, though, because the way that you're describing it in a courtroom and how there's the intuition that is there, you can read people based off of not knowing them and seeing them, and in terms of their body movements, their facial expressions, how they present themselves. And I would say that it's a lot of intuition is definitely metaphysical. But then there are also like individuals who have mediums and psychics that also tap into reading an individual based off of how they present themselves. So, and a psychic though is known, or a medium is known in a very metaphysical format, whereas yours is very, for the purposes of very scientific. It is an art form in the sense that it's a practice. It's something that is regimented, that has rules. Like, do you find that maybe there's kind of a little bit of a bridge between the two, like the metaphysical and what you're practicing to be very practical? And, it's the law, it's a courtroom, so you have to be precise.
I think that there's definitely a bridge. I think telling a client who is either paying you a lot of money or they have a lot of money on the line.
And you're an entertainment attorney, so
right. That is an emphasis of my practice, but I do all types of disputes but a lot of times they find themselves in the context of entertainment. But we do all commercial disputes. Copyright, trademark, breach of contract.
Hold on. I will say though, because the kinds of people in entertainment that you represent are people that have made it, right? Like,
yeah.
So don't discount. She's doing some pretty awesome stuff. So that's pretty amazing. But you're saying about the.
But telling a client who has a lot on the line, hey, like, just trust me, like, I have this intuition, or like, I'm using psychic abilities. It doesn't really, you're not putting that on a resume. You're not putting that on like, on your website saying, hey, like, I'm
It's
kind
not
of a witch, like.
it's not under soft skills.
Yeah. No. But it is very, very valuable. And I do think lawyers are similar to athletes. They are superstitious.
Okay.
And so I do think that part helps in like talking the subject to other lawyers, to be like, don't you wear like your lucky tie, on the first day of trial. And there is something to that. There is something to like when you feel confident as a trial attorney in your choices, the jury also picks up on that, and so it's confidence. So much is confidence, and also in the courtroom, so much is story, and so much is it's actually like acting in a way, because you need to win. They need to believe you. They need to believe your side of it, and they need to like you.
Right. It's really interesting because, okay, so my daughter, she's on, I don't want to say, 'cause she's going to be like, why? But she's on the mock trial team.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
So she's had some really interesting experiences with traveling to different states, and then having individuals like, that are the judges say specific things about perhaps you were too mean, or you were coming off blah, 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 or whatever. And they give you like kind of constructive feedback. But I do think it has a lot to do with the optics of the person too, like what do you look like? What do you give off? So I kind of feel like maybe it goes both ways, but there's also an energy aspect to it.
Sure.
So I would love to understand, energy, not just in the courtroom, but if there are any places in your life that you might have experienced like dark energy, or energy, like you feeling a certain kind of energy from a person, or entering a room, or, is that something that also comes into play, do you think, in those aspects?
So in the course of my life, I have definitely encountered people with a negative energy. I would almost say like the energy vampire.
Yeah. Different kinds of
different
energy.
different kinds of energy. And I think it's funny because it's kind of like coming full circle, or it's the other side of the coin. I think that when I was younger and coming up in my practice and in my personal life, I tolerated a lot more negative energy in my life. And I think that that's hugely related to the fact that I had to move a lot and accept people as they were who came into my life. And when I had to be very open-minded about how people show up. And because as it means for survival, like social survival. And so that lets you really be like, oh yeah, I totally understand your plight, and really be accepting of people however they show up. And I joke about it. I say like a high tolerance for bad behavior.
Yeah.
And that's a part of it, I think, is like as you age and as you start to realize, okay, like I've seen the way that this story ends before. You know what I mean? When you're putting more into something than someone else is putting in, or they're kind of, I don't want to say being a Debbie Downer, because I think like being a realist has its moments in anything, and especially practicing law, it's like you actually want to have someone tell you the negative parts of your case, because it's going to make your case better in the end. You're going to be prepared to overcome those obstacles and what the other side is going to say really about your case.
And that's constructive, though. I feel like we can recognize when something is constructive versus
when you I think you can, when you've honed in that skill, and it's like we have it inside, our body knows, and we quiet it, or we distract away from it, or we compartmentalize, and we don't take the time to be like, or have like the difficult conversation, or the difficult cutting away, which I never was a person to cut people out of my life when I was young. I kind of like just accepted everyone. Now I definitely am very guarded about who's in my energy, who's in my space, because I'm ascending.
Yeah.
And anyone who's around me is also going to be ascending. And if that inspires you, great, come along. But if you're trying to dim my ascension, I don't have time for it.
Can you elaborate on ascension? I mean, I think that maybe there are different concepts that might be related to it, but I'd love to hear.
Sure. For me, it's like a vibrational pull and synchronicities that happen in my life where I'm like, that are nodding to me saying, this is the next right choice, and this is what's going to help you fulfill this goal, that goal, which a lot of my goals are more about like generally raising the frequency of everyone, like humanity. And I don't have time or energy to give to anything that's not doing that. And so the ascension part is like, what is gonna, is this the next step in my highest good?
It takes a certain kind of person to think about it in terms of a highest good, right? Because I think that most people are pretty, they're into themselves, where it's like, is this the best thing for me? Not so much the highest good, because I think that there's a differentiation between the two, right? Like, okay, well, am I going to get more pieces of candy? That could be good for me. But what's actually good for me? What's actually good might be like, don't eat that candy. You could get diabetes. Like, don't, so I feel like there's a difference. I mean, so ascension is important. So definitely you don't want people that are dimming your light, and so energy, I would say, definitely plays into that. Definitely intuition, but energy as well, because are you taking my energy? And within the energy itself, as what kind of I've been delving into this phenomenon of energy, there's energy doesn't go away, right? It's transferred from one state to another, whether it be internally as kind of a measure of your feelings. Or it could be even just the color blue that you're wearing, or even the things that are on. It's some format of energy, so it's it doesn't go away. From a scientific perspective, there's the whole concept of electromagnetism, where perhaps maybe you're charged at a certain scientific level where maybe I can sense that might be the case. So in terms of the way that you interpret energy from a scientific perspective, but then also from this metaphysical space, like where do you find that there might be a bridge or?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it has to do with the authenticity piece. I feel like when you're acting from your authentic, and I think to get to that point, you have to take quiet time with yourself, like whatever that looks like for you. Some days it's like, I'm saying to myself, okay, universe, show me how good it can get. And that's it. That's all I have time to do. Some days I'm like saging my whole house and I'm chanting and I'm listening to the megahertz, I'm doing, I'm doing all of that stuff, but it's not every day. It's not every day. But through all of that, you gain the certainty within yourself. And so that gives you the authenticity. And then that gives you the confidence. Then you are in a space where you're attracting like. And if that is the magnetic field that we're trying to arrive at, I think that that's part of it. It's like attracting like, you're vibrating on a frequency where other people are going to be attracted to that energy as well. The people that you want.
Right.
But there's also like people who are like predators.
Right.
How
would you describe a predator? Because I think that I also feel that there are certain individuals that have like a low vibe, low frequency, maybe I'm optimistic. I'm like, no, maybe they're just in a learning or whatever. But then there are people that how do you explain a serial killer?
Right.
I
Right.
mean, that's not a high vibration person.
No.
Like,
No, but it's interesting because it's not a high vibration person, but they're putting a lot of energy. It's not the same energy, but it's a lot of energy.
yeah.
They're putting a lot of energy towards, nefarious actions. I often wonder, like, is it subconscious or is it conscious? I think a lot of times in predators, it's conscious.
Yeah.
But I think there's a study about women who have been the victim of a predator, and the likelihood of them being re-victimized by a new predator is like some exponential number. And when you think of it in terms of like the animal kingdom, or like animals who can sense, who have more senses than we do,
Right.
that we know about, or that we use, is that they can sense a victim. They can sense an easy target. They can smell it. They can, there's gives. And so just because they have negative energy doesn't mean that they're not empathic.
Oh, no. Oh, yes.
And that they're picking up on their way in, and how your open heart, and that's been something I have had to learn the hard way, for sure. And I think that there's a lot to be studied.
Oh, yeah. And I think it's like it's a science that has not been pinned down yet. And especially what you're saying with it's not that they're not empathic. I mean, they're crazy. But it's not like they can't read the room, I mean, there's, and even just not just even with serial killers. I mean, in the relationship scene where people have like an avoidant attachment style, and just very inherently they're looking for somebody that is an anxious attachment, and it's just the way that they're balancing themselves out because they have specific needs and they're looking for somebody to meet those needs. So it's almost something that they just feel. They know. It's not even that they have to compute it, right?
Right.
It's just something that
it's like a magnet.
Oh, yeah. It's like a magnet.
Yeah.
So do you find that maybe, have there been any experiences, specific like anecdotes or anything in your lifetime that you have noticed where you've had to clear an energy? Because I think that we're all looking for positive energy, and as we're evolving and learning, you definitely want to be around the right people. But sometimes you're exposed to people that are not the right people.
Yeah.
How do you recalibrate?
So I'm always burning stuff in my house. I'm always burning the Palo Santo. I'm always burning the different.
Do you think it's like a cultural thing? How did you come about that?
How did I first start burning things? I mean, this is another thing that it just.
How did I start? We'll make sure that we follow it up with how did I start burning things?
Yeah. It was not cultural.
Right.
It was, yeah. No, it was not cultural. But it was intuitive. And so that's that part where it's like, is this in my inherent DNA sometime back there in our collective memory? Because it's not something that my mom taught me. It's not something that I saw my grandma do. It's not, but my dad's mother was 100%, or my dad's grandmother was 100% Native American.
Right.
So maybe it's just imprinted in my DNA that I just inherently knew I need to start burning stuff. I need to get stuff out of. And in fairness, I reject it. My mom was quite religious. I rejected traditional religion from a pretty early age. And honestly, I was like, do I believe in God? For quite some time. But I've had what can only be described as spiritual experiences, such that I could never say that I don't believe in something. But that's been a a progress. But I kind of always believed in ghosts.
Yeah.
I always believed in ghosts and like creepy energy
Oh,
and like,
gosh.
you know what I mean? Like wanting to get rid of creepy energy.
You
I
don't
think,
believe it until then it happens. And then you're like, oh, what was that?
right.
What was that? I don't know. But but you're right. You're absolutely right, especially when it comes to burning sage. Here's my idea on something like that, because we have a lot of different kinds of categories in terms of belief systems, where you might have astrology or numerology, or there's the crystals and even burning of the sage. And what I have seen observationally is that it's typically not just in one silo of a culture.
Oh, no.
It is in many. So you might have numerology, astrology in India, but then at the same time you have it in Africa, and then you have it in Native American cultures. You might have it in South, like the ancient Incas and whatnot. If there are so many across the board, from a research and scientific perspective, if you look at it, why are so many different cultures and so many different geographical areas believing in something that basically can be siloed, where you might not have, even if it was beginnings of civilization, you're across the ocean but you're still practicing the same thing? It makes
I couldn't
so
agree
there's
more.
something that,
yeah.
and I think that this is where the unexplained comes in, is that it's hard to put your finger on it. But why the F is everybody doing it?
Right.
It makes no sense. But it does make sense, because there's some linkage there that I think that we're all drawn to some degree. And in some ways, because we can't make sense of it, maybe people deny it. But then there are aspects to it, like, I know people that tarot reading and talking to mediums, talking to psychics, or talking to their priest or pastor, and it's for them, they're searching for something.
100%.
And essentially what are they providing? They're providing a wholeness that I think that us all in terms of human nature, we're all kind of looking for. So I mean, I think it's interesting. So I think that specifically with it being inherent, where you're clearing that kind of energy, maybe that's what you knew. I mean, is that something that
I mean, now that you bring this up, I just got back from Oaxaca, and while I was there, we did I can't speak Spanish,
Okay.
so I'm not gonna try it, but it's like the hot hut.
Oh yeah. I've heard of that. Yeah. And then
That's
you
like,
sweat and sweat,
you
and
sweat,
then
and
you have visions.
and you have visions, and we had a shaman, and he did a whole ceremony with us that was so cool, but it was very similar to the shaman that I see here in Chicago, who her practice is like West African.
Okay. What does she teach you? And I think that for anybody that's listening, I know when you hear that, oh, I have a shaman, it sounds like what are you doing?
Yeah.
But I'm going to say, I love experiences. It's maybe like, the word is stigmatized, but it's a knowledgeable person that is providing information in a realm that perhaps maybe we feel kind of inclined to, that may not have, you put your finger on it and you can explain it, but there is something to it. So I would love to hear, yeah.
Yeah, it's guidance that I couldn't get to on my own. Guidance that's within me that I couldn't get to on my own. And so that's why I have a shaman here, and I'll tell you about her practices. But when I did the ceremony that I did in Oaxaca with this very primitive shaman, like out in the middle of nowhere, this was not like a touristy thing. It was like we're with the family and this like town's shaman. But the ceremony is very similar. Making an offering, calling upon all of the ancestors, calling on the earth, the water, the air, all of the elements, and smoke. And burning things and setting intention. And it's very, very similar to her West African practice, and pretty much any type of, including Catholicism and every type of religious practice has some component of this. And so to your point, there is something to it. There is something to it that has helped humanity throughout time. I mean, you could argue that religion has destroyed humanity too throughout time, but
power comes into play at some point.
But we're talking about spirituality. We're talking about like letting us connect with our inner guidance that is outside the realm of the physical world potentially. But Amy, my shaman here, who does the West African style,
and she's very knowledgeable.
She's
very knowledgeable,
incredibly knowledgeable, and does breath work, which basically recalibrates it's somatic breath work. So it resets your vagus nerve. It resets kind of all the trauma, whether it be emotional or physical, that we store in our body. It helps reset that. And I know you came to a class with me.
Yes. That was my first breathwork class, and I really liked it.
Yeah. So for me, being like super, super logical, super, super high performing, super got to do this, got to do that, got to do this. Regimented and driven, and just having a lot on my plate at all times. Meditation for years, had people tell me, you really should meditate. That was never for me. I could never quiet my brain. I'm like, who has time to meditate? And also like, I have to do this thing. Like, the only way that I found that I could get to what would be considered a meditative state is actually having like a to-do list.
Right.
And in this case, the to-do list is like, okay, you're going to breathe in your mouth.
Right. For 5 seconds.
Yeah. And then for out, we're going to listen to great music, and you're just going to, go with it. It's the only time I've ever achieved that. And where I get actual messages. Now, I don't know if they're from God or the universe or myself or my conscious, but I do know that in the end, I come out of them knowing something more than I did, feeling better than I did before, and also having like a calm sense of certainty about my life.
Oh yeah, and absolutely. And I think that there is an unknowingness coming out of it, because you wonder, at least from a lived experience perspective, like, I was thinking this and that and whatnot, but the way that you're explaining it is that when you're calming your body down, you're not in this fight or flight sort of mindset where you're thinking da, 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 and ticking and thinking, what if this person in the past, or what's going to happen in the future. It basically blocks you out to be very present.
100%.
Which definitely, I would see that physiologically speaking definitely calms you down, which I think that specifically with breath work, as you continue to do it, and you've been doing it for, because there's the Wim Hof, and I know Tony Robbins does a lot of like this breath work sort of thing.
Like a fire breath work,
yeah,
right?
And it gets you kind of really going and excited, and of course, you're going to reach certain levels of elation, right? Or, it's like doing drugs without doing drugs.
Yeah, yeah, it really is.
Meditating is the new...
Right. I brought one friend and she was like, should I like microdose a little mushroom before I go? I was like, I don't think you're going to need it. You're going to have visions.
Right. Yeah. And you do have visions. It's an interesting experience, because you, after a bit, you start to block out all the extra. And I think, at least from my understanding from a scientific perspective, is that that's when you can really separate that consciousness. So this physical plane that we're in, we're having a conversation. You have a mental plane where you're, bah, 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 saying things or whatnot. And then, you quiet that down, and maybe under that comes like the true essence of yourself. And I think because of this breath work, you're able to push those distractions out of the way to really get to a point. So tell me about like these visions. Like, how does that, it's an interesting, you go through it. Like, have you noticed certain things?
It's funny because so my teacher, her class is on Mondays, and throughout since the time that I met her, which has been now several years, when I have big decisions to make in my life, or I have like a lot of turmoil going on, I would go have a private appointment with her, and she would do a private breathwork class. And also do a bunch of woo-woo stuff, too, which I was like, okay, whatever.
Sometimes you
whatever.
like it.
There's smoke, there's, whatever, that's fine. Yeah. But, it was really for the breath work and taking the time, really. A lot of it is just like processing, taking the time to process something as opposed to being distracted and doing the next, and, doom scrolling or whatever it is. And then she would always invite me, like, you should come to my class on Monday. And I was like, no, this feels like pretty, like, it's a personal thing. I don't know if I'm going to, like, come to the class on Mondays. But eventually I did go. And it's funny because I have brought over the years many people with me, and almost everyone I've ever brought now attends regularly. But leading up to it, it's energetically taxing. So leading up to it, you're like, oh, why did I sign up? Why did I agree to go? And for the first song, because she plays like a beautiful playlist and it's always a different theme, basically. I mean, you could request a theme, I suppose, but usually she picks the theme and it's usually exactly what you need, coincidentally. But for the first song, you're like, gosh, why am I here? I could be doing, you're like, and also I feel like, is it working? And then by the end of the first song, your conscious brain is completely shut off. You're completely in a different place. You're downloading information that you didn't even know that you had access to. And I've had all kinds of visions from being like covered in bees, but like in a very gentle way, where they're harvesting honey, and like the whole point of the entire vision was like how sweet and lovely life is, and how it's meant to be spread like honey. It's all, a lot of it, and it's some stuff is like, I've had a wolf one, which is like so outside of the scope of something I'm ever thinking about. Wolves,
Yeah, right.
It's like the whole vision was like a bad 80s, you remember those 80s silkscreen t-shirts, 80s or 90s with like the wolf howling at the moon and it's like 7 wolves and like mountains. It was like a vision like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Not something that is like on my
right. But maybe it's in your subconscious.
Right.
And I think that, and we were having this conversation before you came, we're talking about dreams, and how there's your physical reality. When you go to sleep, if you went to sleep with a headache, do you feel that headache when you're sleeping?
Right.
You don't, right? Because something in our body has shut down that sensation of pain on the outside, which means that we can control it, right? Maybe not like, okay, I told my organs to do better, no, maybe not, but perhaps very like, at a very foundational level, maybe that's something that is there, right?
Oh, for sure.
But then you get into this dream state, right? Where basically there's many kinds of dreams that you could have. Sometimes you're running away from something and, or you're just trying to like get something and it just won't, or sometimes like, it might be something completely unrelated, Where do those come from, right?
It's crazy. I have like insane architectural dreams. Like I am an interior design school dropout. Before I was a lawyer, so like that's not too crazy. I think like my 7th grade science project was like architecture related too. But I have crazy. I'm always like renovating some crazy house or buying a house, and it always is requiring. Sometimes I'm working so hard in my dreams that I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, I worked so hard last night trying to problems.
Okay. I mean, it's vivid, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I want this to be my house. I don't want to wake up like it'll have all these cool features, and I'm like, I have like robots and. But
it's elaborate.
Yeah. But I haven't gotten to the place where I can control my dreams at all.
Like lucid
dreaming. And I know people who have done that, and it sometimes more often than not, I don't even realize that I'm in a dream.
Well, I think that when that breathwork class is a way to lucid dream.
Oh, yeah.
which that was
Yes.
the first time I've experienced that, where I was like, I'm in this, but I'm not in this.
Yeah, you're in a different state. You're not
Yeah.
asleep.
Yeah.
You're not asleep. You're in a different realm for sure. And your senses, like it's the combination of the music and the breathing. And she does do a little bit of like a guided component to it, but it's very minimal.
Right.
Um, and you're not here for sure. And so yeah, there's something to it. And what's really cool is that you can actually access it anytime. Like, she sends us with the playlist, and if you're disciplined enough to do the breath work yourself, like you can access it anytime. When we were in Oaxaca, and we had this shaman who was like I wish I could Temescula?
Temecula is like, I think, is that California,
Temesculan, or
Maybe.
no,
Oh,
but it's
mescaline?
no, it wasn't
Okay.
mescaline. We didn't take anything. We
Okay.
didn't take anything.
Yeah.
It was just hot, and there was a ceremony, but he also did like a lot of chanting.
Okay.
And at one point, my sister was like, Heather, lead us in the breath work. And I've never done that before. I had participated in the breath work, but I've never like led it. And I was like, okay. And so I started leading everyone in the breath work, and there were girls with us that had never taken the class. And and we scream during this breathwork class too. There's a screaming component. And so it was really powerful. And the shaman down there completely got involved with it, and everyone was having visions. I mean, and we were in a very small, hot room. People were also having allergic reactions to the
heat.
Not to the heat. They line it with a particular type of branches, like you're laying on leaves and branches.
Wow. Okay.
I did not have an allergic reaction, but a couple people did. They were like,
oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, that's bad.
I was like, they're getting. It was my friend with it. We'll just talk a lot of shit to each other. I was like, it's getting the evil out of you.
There you go.
The evil coming out.
Yeah.
But she's a little negative. No, I'm just kidding. I know she'll probably eventually watch this. Just kidding.
What are friends for?
Right.
No, but there is that. And so if you would have gone to that village the week before the Wright brothers had their first flight and put like a chunk of metal into the air, and you would have asked them, are they going to put a chunk of metal into the air? They'd have been like, hell no, that's not even a thing. But what happened a week later is they had their first flight. And I think that sometimes society in general is very close-minded in the sense that this is what we know. Did you think that we're never going to learn new things? Are there never going to be new discoveries ever again? I think that sometimes even when it comes to like spirituality, I think that we are still increasing our range of the things that we are learning and we know and we can validate, and I would say spirituality has a very scientific basis as well. It's a fact, science comes into it, and it's also influenced by that spiritual metaphysical realm as well. So I think it's kind of, we can all get into that lane of like, this is what we know, we're hardliners and we're just going to believe in this. But the actuality of it, since the beginning of time, we've always been learning things.
Right.
And we're not going to stop learning things because there's always going to be some new invention, some new theorem that some physicist that's sitting there in the middle of some village in Sweden, whatever, that is not being funded by these larger companies to get their research out, but has still discovered how to manipulate gravity or whatever. There's so many different things that could potentially happen. And so I think that we need to be open to that. I mean, the fact that there, even when it comes to like, energy and intuition, but then also, you're talking about like quantum realities and measuring all of these things. Maybe there are things that are out there in our world that we don't even have the tools to measure it yet.
Right.
There are frequencies that we're not even aware of. So for me, I don't want to say that I know everything, but I definitely don't know a lot of things.
Yeah,
That's 100%, So, I mean, what are your thoughts on kind of like this process and when it comes to these coincidences and these synchronicities, that quantum entanglement, do you have any thoughts on that? Or
I don't think that anything is coincidental. I think that any time that you recognize a synchronicity, that is, you're being provided some guidance. And that can be just like you were saying, you're thinking about someone and they call, or you hadn't thought about them in a long time, and then suddenly they call and you had just thought about them that day. I think that we send out messages and we receive messages, but we don't perceive them the same way we perceive with all of the rest of our other five senses. And I think the more that you're open-minded to it, the more you see it. It's just like,
like the red car.
Right, right. It's just like saying, I'm gonna see a red car, and then suddenly you can't stop seeing red cars. It's part of our brain. It's part of the way that we're wired. It's the reason why negative self-talk is so detrimental to people. Our brain is listening. Our brain is always listening.
Yeah.
And whatever you say to it, it looks for proof of that.
Right.
It's like an obedient dog. If you have a great obedient dog and you're like, every time you go outside, I'm going to give you a treat. Every time you go outside, I'm going to give you a treat. That dog is waiting there for the next time to go outside because they want a treat. Our brain is the exact same way. It gets that treat reward every time it proves you right. And that's the same reason why people are resistant to think about new ideas or be open-minded. Even though the world is changing and there's been so much development, it's because it's scary if you tell your brain the same thing over and over again, and then suddenly something new happens, or you can't take in the new information. It's the same reason why we have echo chambers politically right now, where people can't take in information from different sources than they're used to, because it challenges like the very core of who they are and what they believe, and they're clinging to that so hard because it's scary to change, and it's scary to have an open mind. And it's like the same reason that we cling to that is the same reason why the opposite effect is true, is that when you know that there's miracles, when you know that once in a lifetime things happen every day, when you know that things are always working out for you, when you say things always work out for me, no matter what, everything always works out for me, you're going to prove that right. Your brain is going to prove that right. Your experience is going to prove that right.
No, agreed. I think, what is it? And this is like a very Joe Dispenza sort of thing, but I think what he says is that there's the reticular activating system in your mind, that portion of your brain. Maybe I botched it, I don't know, but basically it's there, like exactly what you're saying, is to make sense of what's happening. Give you those excuses that no, you can't do that. Your brain is solely there to try to make sense of everything that is going on. So what is like something I saw earlier this morning about, like, there's a box of pizza, right? And then there's like a little plastic window where you see all the pepperoni and all the cheese on that one little window thing. But who's to say that the rest of it has all of it on it too,
Yeah, your brain is filling in the rest.
Your brain just fills in the rest, and it's just like, yep, it's going to be a big, juicy pizza. and maybe sometimes it's not, where people also reveal only certain parts of themselves and won't show them the hollowness of the rest, whereas also a very social media related thing, but then also inherently our brains are also like that too, where we're just constantly trying to make sense of it. If you have a negative disposition to life, then you're always constantly filling in those blanks of no, don't do that. That could happen. Don't do that. No, you're not good enough for that. Do you think that the opposite end of the spectrum, being optimistic and filling in the blanks, because I mean, as a kid, I was kind of like, I wouldn't put too much energy into thinking about the best case scenario, because I'm like, oh, what if it doesn't happen and then I'll feel bad, But as an adult, how do you think that maybe there might be some overly wishful thinking when you're only thinking good things?
Sure, like you can then not be attuned to preparing for the worst case scenario. Yeah. So I won't say I struggle with that in my field, but I think there's a study on this. Like the more pessimistic you are, the better lawyer you are, right? Because you're discerning risk.
Right.
And
right.
that's a big part of what our job is,
Right.
to discern risk and to say, okay, this is the very worst thing that can happen. How do we shield against this? And so that's directly out of tune with everything works out for me. Show me how good it can get. And it's a culture clash that I experience every day, because I have to think about the worst case scenario in order to best do my job.
Right.
And sometimes that's pretty detailed how it plays out. When I'm collaborating with my staff, we'll say, okay, so we make this decision. What's the worst thing that can happen? And we doomsday it all the way down the line, because we need to know that in order to count against it, but also to like, okay, to what degree is this a situation that we can fix or can't fix?
Right.
If is the reward of it actually working out worth the potential negative consequence?
Right.
Without being like giving a super specific concrete example. And it's taxing on me because it's out of line with my ascension.
Your persona.
My persona, my
in
ascension.
general.
Yeah. And so it's something that I 100% struggle with in my practice. And it's funny because one of the things I thought when I knew we were talking today, I was like, I struggle with like the perfectionism of everything pretty much, including my spiritual practice. Like I'll be hard on myself if it's like, okay, well today I specifically wanted to do A, B, and C. I wanted to journal. I wanted to like read a chapter of this book. Like I'm really focused on my growth on that side. But I also have like a really demanding job that things pop up and I have to do them, and I'm not going to have time to do that. Right. And so I have to like let myself off the hook and say like, okay, well you did like your one, you looked yourself in the mirror and you did your affirmation today or whatever, you lit a candle, some
compassion towards yourself, right? Like you did what you could,
Right, exactly. But you have too many days of that and you get further and further away from that internal voice and that authenticity. And I think that is a risk that happens when you are focused on the negative, right? There has to be a balance. I mean, there is a notion to this, like, be as delusional as you can in order to manifest, like, to exceed your expectations of how good you can get, and like expect miracles.
Right.
And I think there's definitely something to that. But if you always are living in that space and you're in a field like I'm in, you're just gonna get your ass handed to you by a judge. Like you're not gonna be prepared.
Right.
But there's something to it. I just don't know, and I think that's probably why attorneys have like I think the worst job satisfaction. Like I think dentists used to kill themselves the most. Now it's attorneys.
Okay.
It's a hard
it's a hard field.
It's a hard field. And I think it actually like the more on the one hand, COVID, like having Zoom court and there was a lot of efficiencies created for lawyers, particularly litigators. But I think it also kind of separates you from humanity in a way. Like we used to like see each other as humans before the court, before the court call. Not for trial. Yes, you see people for trial, but we go to court a lot. Like we have status reports and stuff that we have to give to the court. And so you used to like see other attorneys, your opponents in the courtroom, and you would, shoot the shit with them about their day. Not every single interaction would be like acrimonious or like just focused on like your task or like, fighting for your client.
You have to compartmentalize,
But now you don't really get that because you don't talk before Zoom.
Yes.
You're literally just stepping up. Everything is via email or phone. And very efficient. A little bit of loss of humanity, a little bit of loss of that like human interaction, and maybe to an extent, like I feel like if you don't focus, if you don't have an intention to focus on the positive outlook or how good things could be, you could let it slip away.
Oh,
like it takes a lot of practice to just be like, okay, this is from this time to this time, this is what I'm doing. And then I'm going to like carve this moment out for myself.
Oh, yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think that also, the satisfaction of things kind of starts to slip at a certain age where you've experienced a lot of life. Maybe you're head down, just taking care of your kids. Maybe your kids are leaving. Maybe you're exiting a career. Maybe there's not a lot of job satisfaction. And I find that when your life is like kind of only the indication of how well you're doing is all of these external factors, and you're not being kind of fed internally, right? Like that's when I see and I'm hearing over and over again. I mean, there are people that are committing suicide. They're, or whatever, or just like, having like, these kind of
existential crisis,
and it's just like, because they've probably gone so far as to not
out of balance
themselves that, it can be very easy to slip into kind of like the habit of, just doing everything for others, where we're the only ones that have really been with us for everything that we've been through, and so it's kind of hard to, so I feel like, as you're seeing it as a whole, there's definitely, like as we've been talking about the energy with manifestation, we're talking about intuition, quantum entanglement, if anything. I mean, I would love to hear your thoughts on how it relates to us, not just like, there's a scientific aspect to it, but like I'd love to hear your thoughts on how important it is to be grounded in both ways and how somebody could start to be if that's something that they're not really involved in.
Yeah, I think from a humanities perspective, it benefits everyone if everyone is doing something to listen to their internal guidance. That can only raise the frequency for humanity and and it also gives you more satisfaction. And it lets you, like I come up with my best ideas truly when I take the time to just be still, even though I fight it. I really fight it. I'm like, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to go to breathwork class on Monday. I should just stay and finish this task. It never doesn't result in a better solution at some point. Within the next 24 hours, I'll usually have a great idea that I hadn't thought of before. And it's from just literally slowing down and so even slowing down that's not based on some type of specific practice. If you're like, okay, I'm just gonna relax, I'm just gonna chill tonight and watch TV. It's nice. You're relaxing. You're not panicking. You're not, in a fight or flight response.
Right.
But you're actually still just delaying that voice. You're still pushing aside and distracting and diluting what you could be learning about yourself and about humanity. And so, like, in terms of like where to pick up a practice, I would really recommend going to a guided breathwork class that it is meditation, but it's different than just sitting there trying to not.
It's more training wheels meditation.
Yes. It's like if you're already a person who like needs, like who has a great difficulty meditating. I mean, when I first even heard about meditating, I was like, okay, I'm never gonna, if your gut instinct is like, I'm not going to be good at this. Yeah. Go try a guided breathwork class and be open-minded to it. It doesn't take a lot. Like I think with Amy's class, it's like, what do we do? Like 4 or 5 songs. You're listening to 4 or 5 songs, and by the end of it, you are going to have an experience. period.
And it's legal.
Yeah. And
It's
it's legal. And, you know, you could disagree about the basis for the experience. You could say like, oh, it's totally self-generated and it's just what's lying beneath the surface in my subconscious. Or you could say, no, this is, you know, this was just because I'm really moved by the music or whatever. It doesn't matter. If at the end of the day, it gives you any breakthrough in your life whatsoever or provides us any reprieve from the constant barrage of information and frankly, like depending on what your algorithm is feeding you, negative information, just give yourself that gift. We're here for such a short time and we have so many more resources available to us that we don't access.
Right.
And we spend, you know, the other 23 and a half hours that you spend in your day, you can continue, you know, driving down the train of doom.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think in our society now, because we're so used to be constantly stimulated, that I will say that it is hard to read a book sometimes and focus. And you know, meditation, not thinking for that long, you know, and I will say that definitely the breath work, I love that aspect of it as I'm hearing it from you, where the breathing definitely, when you're focusing on something else. I mean, nowadays you have like these Instagram videos or whatever where somebody's like doing, like there are two screens and one somebody's saying something and the other person's doing something. And it's like people are so used to like looking at both at the same time that this is where our society is headed.
Yes.
So we're not built to constantly be doing things all the time. We weren't built to be on a phone all day long. That's just not. And sometimes being boring and not doing something, maybe your brain actually needs that. But the sad part is a lot of people are afraid to be there.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable, but once you get there and move past it, you benefit from it.
1,000%. In different ways too, in ways that you didn't even know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, really when I started coming back to it, I was like, I had problems that I wanted to solve. You know, I was like, I'm having like a crisis that I need to solve, and the only thing I know to do really that is outside of my hands is this. You know,
right.
and now it's interesting because I'm not in a crisis mode, but I'm still learning new things that I wouldn't have otherwise learned, and that I can't get there by myself.
Oh, yeah.
Like I've tried to do the breath work by myself. It's kind of like the same reason why I need a trainer.
You need a community.
Like I need someone. Yeah, I need to be in the presence of others, and I need to like have someone like, you know, this is what we're doing.
Right.
You know, like the same reason why I need someone to stretch me.
Right.
Yeah. I can't stretch myself.
That's true. We all need stretching.
Yeah.
And help with it for sure.
Yeah.
All right, amazing. Well, this has been like a really just I loved our talk.
Likewise.
I think that it's these are things that are very necessary. It's a necessary application to your physical life, to be in touch and in tune with your mental plane, you know, and I think that we're not spending enough time doing it. Any like last kind of pointers or anything for somebody that might be looking to outside of meditation, kind of, you know, to be able to channel into their intuition or energy, or, you know, understanding these kind of, because it seems intimidating because there's a lot. What would you say would be first steps to kind of understanding this space for somebody who maybe just watched and was like, woo woo, what are they talking about?
Right.
You know, what would you say would be, but maybe hopefully by now, as I've listened to this conversation, there's a lot, it's very practical and helpful to somebody, especially, you know, us as a society. So, I mean, is there any pointers?
So, yeah, I definitely would say that I had an open-mindedness initially to like ghosts and spirits, but I was skeptical kind of otherwise, especially skeptical to the positive effects, I would say. I do think that if you are a skeptic, I don't expect that this is something you will start and accomplish on your own. I think you need a teacher and you need a community, like you were saying. And you would be surprised. I would invite you to Google, breathwork class. Maybe do one in connection with a yoga class where it feels a little bit more like something maybe you're more comfortable with. Feel like people are more accepting of yoga as not being a spiritual practice, even though it is a big part of certain people's spiritual practice. And see, you will be surprised at who you run into. Everyone is not burning sage and,
the stereotypical.
Yeah, everyone. It's not all woo woo. And I think that the more that the spreads, the knowing that we have within ourselves, the more that it spreads, the more, especially to like people who are maybe resistant to knowing, the better it is for humanity, and the better it is for us to not be drowning out by distractions that, frankly, like corporate interests and people who control and bodies that control want us to be separated from that. And so, I mean, maybe you can, if you're skeptical, you can think of it as an act of aggression towards the powers that be that control our lives, to say, like, actually, I owe it to myself to, like, get to know myself better. And, like, it's kind of like we were in trouble as a kid, and the teacher said, like, go look in the mirror, or if you were two and other kids were fighting and you had to, like, stare at each other. It's like, it's kind of like a punishment to say, like, I'm going to get to know myself. I'm going to look at myself. It's hard work, but, like, life is really hard. Imagine waiting until the very last moment to look at yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
So, like, take the first step, be open-minded. And if it doesn't give you a takeaway, I don't ever make promises or guarantees. I'm a lawyer. Like, everything is going to come with, like, a caveat, like fine print, like.
Yeah.
But I promise if you go to a breathwork class and do the work, you will come out with some new information about yourself. And, like, doesn't everybody want to know new information about themselves? Right. I feel like we're very self-centered.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, for sure.
Quit diagnosing yourself on TikTok.
Right.
Instead,
exactly.
Go actually do the work.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. It's different reading the book than watching, like, a 30-second reel, for sure.
Yeah, it's different having the experience that writes the book.
Right. Oh, yeah. There you go. And that's it. That's exactly it. Okay, I loved talking to you. I could continue this forever. I feel like there's a lot of depth in this conversation, but also, like, it's a different level of discovery, right? And I think that we both kind of also, it's just finding these spaces to explore. You have to explore things in order to truly be able to start finding yourself. And whether it's something that you're not open to, and maybe you're just pushing the envelope a little bit, you owe it to yourself to learn, and knowledge is important. So thank you so much for being here and talking to me. And,
sure, my pleasure.
It was really great. And I was just wondering, so is there a place that people can reach you? I know if they need a trial attorney.
My law firm is called Valkyrie Law Group. You can Google us. We're online. I think you could just probably type it in the URL.
Okay. All right. Amazing. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I loved it.
Yeah.
Yay.